I'm Rob Port from SayAnythingBlog.com. The fiscal cliff is looming nationally. It's got a number of implications for Americans in terms of taxes. And one area that might hit North Dakota pretty hard, and according to the Tax Foundation, by the way, North Dakota is one of the top 10 states that would be impacted by the fiscal cliff if Congress ends up doing nothing. In terms of taxes, I think per capita taxes, North Dakotans would go up nearly $5,000 per household, and that's averaged out. But one of the key areas that maybe a lot of people are overlooking is the issue of the estate tax. I have with me on the line the head of the North Dakota Farm Breau, Doyle Johannes, who has been making an issue out of the estate tax and talking about what the potential impact could be for farmers and ranchers and other people working in agriculture in North Dakota. Doyle, first of all, thanks for your time. And second, explain why is the estate tax such an issue for the farming and ranching community specifically?
Well, the big thing is we feel that we've already paid taxes on this money to obtain the land that we have already that's been paid. But when we see the significant increase in the valuation of our property in the last year or two, why suddenly this estate tax gets to be a huge thing. I mean, it jeopardizes the very existence of being able to pass our farms down to the next generation. So that's our biggest problem with it right now. It's just we lose our deductions and our tax rate doubles. It's a real concern.
Because farming and ranching operations can often be, because a lot of times when the estate tax is talked about in political circles, it's talked about as though it only impacts very rich people. I think at one point, some of the politicians were calling it the Paris Hilton tax, things like that, making it sound like it's just these very rich heirs and people who are heirs to massive fortunes who pay this tax. But actually, if you look at farming and ranching, it's very easy for a farming or a ranching operation. Once you start adding up the value of land, once you start adding up the value of big ticket item machineries and stuff like that, it's very easy for an estate to reach the threshold of the estate tax. And then what happens to the farmers and ranchers when they try to pass that on to the next generation of their family to farm or ranch in that operation?
Well, and that's exactly the thing. When you look at the price of land and you see what these, there's been a lot of land auctions, and I see it looks like there's a real glut coming up here now before the end of the year. I think there's a lot of people that were thinking about it, and they've kind of got pushed off the fence and decided, they're not going to take that chance, of losing, and have the increase in this tax. But you take, for instance, just 320 acres. That's a half section of land. Most people, a lot of the average farmers, I would say, I don't think it's a stretch to say they own at least 1,000 acres of land. And when you look at the prices of what property is going for lately, it only takes a couple of quarters of land, and you're at that threshold already. Plus, you've got all their chattel, their equipment, and everything else they've got involved in it, and you throw that in on top of it, and you suddenly, it's very easily. It wouldn't take a very big farm. We're not talking rich land barons or anything like that. Just a regular average farmer in North Dakota. They're going to have a minimum of $2 million estate tax to their operation, and I've said it before. I don't know of a lot of people that have that kind of money laying around, cash, that they could pay that kind of a tax bill with and still keep their farm unit together without having to sell some assets just to try to keep some of it together. And of course, in this day and age, it's volume and that dictates that you're able to to be able to continue on farming and make it as a farmer and rancher in the state. So we see it as a real threat to the existence of our average farms and ranches in North Dakota.
What's the current state of the current state of the estate tax? Because it's changed a lot over the last several years, and in fact, I remember there was one year there where there was no estate tax at all. It's just been very bizarre how this tax has been. So what's the current state if somebody were to unfortunately die in the year 2012 and attempt to pass on their property? What does the estate tax look like right now?
Well, without any previous prior planning and that, right now it is a $5 million. Right now as it stands, is a $5 million deduction that you're allowed, $5 million, and then it's a 28% tax on anything over that. But of course, the talk is that that's going to revert to $1 million, and of exemptions on your estate, and the rate is going to 55%. So that's what we're looking at. I mean, reduction. You're going to lose $4 million of being able to reduce your exemption, and then like I say, over a doubling of your nearly a doubling of your tax rate.
What are some of the things that farmers and ranchers do to try to avoid because you talked about if you go into a situation like that with no planning at all, what's some sort of the planning things they do to avoid that tax, or to obviously legally avoid that tax?
Well, certainly there's the big pull. You take life insurance policies that to help that you'd have that when at the passing, that you'd use your life insurance premium, or the cash value of that, your life insurance policy, to help pay those estate taxes. Or, if you're fortunate enough to be able to have enough money put away where you can gift some of your property to your future generations that are coming up behind you. But there are instances where there's, just like this rancher and his son out west here, 40 years old in a car accident, and you're taken out of the picture, well, nobody, everybody else thinks somebody die when you're old. Well, it can happen. It can happen overnight. And if you haven't taken care of your business, and it's changed so fast. It's changed so fast. My wife and I had a plan, but I said with the changes and the valuation of things, we've got to go back in and completely revisit that and completely revamp what we've got set up, because things have changed so much. We're no longer protected. Protect our operation is not protected.
That's a very obvious. Yeah, I think that's a point a lot of people don't realize too, is the way the policy is changing, and the way the value of the land and things is changing requires people to be thinking about this all the time, and going through the motions of setting up estates, which isn't free. If you're using an attorney or something like that to do it, that isn't free either. What's the preference? What would you like to see happen as Congress negotiates about this the quote unquote fiscal cliff and the estate tax? What would you like to see Congress do about the estate tax?
Well, of course, in the ideal world, I would love to see them eliminate, this death tax, like we like to call it. I'd love to see that eliminated. I really would, because, like I say, we've paid our taxes on that money to buy that property one time already, and so, but in the likelihood, the way there isn't a lot of support for that, but we think at the very least we need to maintain what we have right now. It has jumped over. You're right. You alluded to it earlier here, how at one time it was $10 million in that, and things, they keep changing. It changes all the time. And that's one thing. And businesses like to know that there is some long-term, what the rules are, and they like long-term stability. And when we have this kind of a political football that they use, you never know which way it's going to bounce and which way it's going to go. And for us to try to plan, for the future and pass, be able to pass it on to the next generation, because that's, of course, everyone's dream, that, farmer, it certainly is mine, that, when you've got two generations coming up behind you, that you just love to see this go on for the fifth and sixth generation, for that to happen. And if something would unexpectedly happen, right now, that would not be a good thing. In very all likelihood, they would end up having to sell some of the assets just to pay the taxes.
What do you think Congress is going to do about the estate tax? Do you have confidence that we're going to maintain the status quo where we're at right now, or are you expecting some other outcome?
I tell you what, I do not expect status quo. Given the current climate in Washington, D.C., with the officials that have been reelected or elected or whatever, I don't see that it's staying where it's at. And unfortunately, I see it. I see it. That we're losing. I don't know whether it's going to go to 1 million. You hear all kinds of rumors going around, but one thing is, I'm pretty confident, is I don't believe it's going to stay where it's at, and I think they're going to try to, they're just going to try to get money wherever they can. It seems like they just refuse to address the spending issue and just, well, how can we raise more money? And it's unfortunate, but that seems like to be the trend right now in Washington, D.C.
Well, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty, and obviously the one thing we are certain about is that there's a lot of uncertainty, and
Yep.
I think that's unfortunate for businesses across the across the spectrum, and farmers and ranchers as well. Doyle, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.